prove to the electorate that you really deserve the position you are vying for, then follow whatever the COMELEC says as far as filing anything or any document is concerned, more particularly SOSE.
Looks like presidential candidate Isko Moreno is gearing up for yet another controversial move. Ramel said that they're looking at filing a petition for the issuance of a writ of mandamus to compel the BIR to enforce the ruling on the Marcoses' estate tax liabilities.
In other news, the COMELEC says they will be able to officially proclaim winners for local positions on the evening of May 9.
Even after 2 or 3 days of voting, after voting, meron na pong partial and official results na lumalabas coming from citizens' arm, media, because they have access to our transparency servers.
One of President Duterte's directives before he leaves his post is ordering the closure of e-sabong operations. Meanwhile, poll monitoring organizations are expecting a high voter turnout on May 9. But how can they assure that voters that the ballots will be safeguarded? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. We will be joined by our guests and the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay at kasama po natin Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5 and Ed Lingao of One News. And Ami Pamintuan will join us later on.
Hello,
Chief,
Robbie,
good evening.
Ed.
Happy Thursday.
Anong binabantayan natin, Ed?
Apat na araw na lang.
Wala nang excuse. Wala nang excuse ha. In-announce na ni President Duterte holiday sa May 9. So wala kayong excuse para hindi bumoto.
So, ibig sabihin, hindi tayo papasok ng
At
May 9?
suspended ang color coding.
Ayan, parang ikaw sabi mo yung happy mo.
Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo papasok ng May 9?
Hindi, papasok ka.
Ayan, kita mo?
Kung hindi, wala kang PF.
Ayan. Yan ang, sa lahat po na ngayon nakilala nyo, sa lahat ng Chiefs, isa lang ang hepe. Simpleng-simple lang. Okay, but now, let's talk about some...
bagong PNP chief sa May 9, ha?
Oh, yung ano?
Oo nga.
General Danao. Yeah, magre-retiro naman si General Carlos Sante.
Bilis ni
diba?
General Carlos, eh.
Sobrang eksakto, no?
But later on, we'll talk more about May 9, of course. A lot of things that you need to know. But before we get to that, joining us right now, Ms. Diane Erica Jogno, Assistant Vice President of the e-sabong Licensing Department of the Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation, or PAGCOR. Good evening and welcome to the Chief, Ms. Jogno.
Good evening, Sir Robbie, Sir Ed. Good evening, Ms. Lucci, Ms. Ami.
Now, and let me say, by the way, kasama na rin natin si Ami Pamintuan. Present. Late, but present.
Present. Late.
Okay. Ma'am, let's set the table here. No? Pagdating sa e-sabong. On the one hand, there are revenues involved here. At the same time, critics have always said anything to do with gambling. We talk about the social ills. Of course, part of the backdrop, may mga nawawala pa nga ng mga sabong operators and players and so on. But let's take it from you first. What is at stake with President Duterte's latest directive?
Of course, sir, with the directive to suspend e-sabong operations, of course, there would be a consequence as to the income being generated by the industry po. So there would be, of course, an effect to the contributions of PAGCOR to the nation's coffers.
Gano'ng kalaki na po
Pero
ba
kayo raw ang
pinag-uusapan natin dyan?
ng paraan, di ba? Yeah.
Sorry. Basic question lang muna. Gano'ng kalaki na po ba pinag-uusapan natin dyan?
As we have been saying in the report, sir, ano po, we are standing to lose around 640 billion, around those
A month,
figures.
right?
Yes po.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, sabi ni Presidente, kayo na raw bahala maghanap ng kaparaanan para makakita ng kapalit na income. Ano ang naiisip nyo? I mean, offhand, what do you have in mind to replace e-sabong?
Yes, Ms. Lucci, that is still under our studies po. Pinag-aaralan po kung saan po namin makukuha yung other sources of income to continue po supporting and sustaining other programs currently being supported by PAGCOR.
Pero ma'am, yung e-sabong naman is relatively young, di ba? I mean, that's relatively recent. I wasn't hearing of e-sabong until last year? Although, of course, I don't know yung mga nag-i-sabong o talagang kung matagal na ito. Pero kung ganun po, ma'am...
Sumikat siya ng pandemic, no?
Kung ganun po, ma'am, it hasn't been there that long, so it should be relatively easier to look for an alternative. I would think.
Yes, for the regulation of e-sabong po, we are just into a year of regulating the industry.
Okay, so mag-isang taon pala. But ma'am, just to set a baseline, ma'am, kasi what my understanding is that the president has not yet issued a formal order to suspend the e-sabong. So where are we now exactly? Bawal ba o hindi? Kasi nanghuhuli na yung mga pulis ng mga nag-iisabong. Pero kahapon, kung sa tama si Atty. Tria, sabi niya, as of yesterday, may isa pa silang pinabayaan na tapusin ng araw. So, doon ako naguluhan eh. Ano ba talaga? Bawal na o hindi pa? O maghintay ng papeles? O paano po?
Sir, we are already in receipt of a memorandum from the Executive Secretary, from the Office of the President, directing po to stop all e-sabong operations. And pursuant to that directive, sir, and actually even before in receipt of that memorandum, pursuant to the announcement of the President, we have directed our licensees to shut down their operations and cease their gaming operations for e-sabong.
Miss
Okay.
Jogno, medyo nabigla kami nung in-announce ni Presidente na tigil na yung e-sabong eh. He cited a study conducted by the Interior Department. Kasama ba kayo dun sa study na yun? Saka ang sinasite dun na reason negative social impact daw. Wala kayo nakita doon na kahit anong magandang social impact ng e-sabong, at least during the pandemic yan sumikat eh. And do you agree nga na meron nga siyang negative social impact?
It was only po the DILG who conducted the survey and the study po, from which the recommendation was based. But for PAGCOR po, we were asked naman po to submit reports as to the status of the industry.
So hindi
Pero kayo mismo,
you disagree na or do you agree na masama nga yung impact? Huwag na muna natin pag-usapan yung mga kinidnap na mga sabungero. Yun lang mga sabetors. You think masama nga yung impact sa society natin?
Opo. We have been receiving po complaints, feedbacks from various channels po. Of course, we are in receipt of these feedbacks from from the public, and we are also in coordination po with other partner government agencies, citing these social ills po. So we in PAGCOR, we started formulating our regulatory framework to at least deter these social issues po. And since we started assuming regulation over the industry, we have been introducing a lot of developments to, of course, address these social issues being brought up against the e-sabong.
Ma'am, we want to hear about those mitigating interventions later on. Pero gusto ko lang i-diretso, ituloy pa na konti yung tanong ni Ami. Basically, kayo ba nagulat sa order ng Pangulo? Or did you see it coming?
We are always just waiting for the guidance from the Office of the President. So when we were in receipt po, we just straight ahead obeyed and complied with the directive to shut down the operations.
Okay. Sige. Now, let's talk about what you said earlier na meron na kayong inuumpisahan essentially to mitigate against the social ills that a lot of critics keep bringing up, not just against e-sabong but gambling in general. Give us an example of something that you feel can mitigate and that will counter these social ills and basically make it worth the revenue on the other side that you are contributing to government.
Recently, we have instituted these banning mechanisms. These banning mechanisms po are already in place for our brick and mortar casinos, for other game offerings of PAGCOR. So we likewise introduced this banning mechanism to the e-sabong industry. So basically po, the player himself or herself or even the immediate family members can request the banning of the player from engaging or getting access to the e-sabong platform. And once banning is requested from our betting platforms po of our licensed operators, ang consequence din po nun ay banning from entry to any PAGCOR licensed entity. So that is one measure po na we introduced to the e-sabong industry to at least respond to problem gambling or addictions po to
Pero dalawa lang po muna yung tanong ko. First is, ganun ba kasimple yun? Because marami ngayon nanonood ng mga misis, sinasabi, pwede pala yun. Diba? Pero siguro, tanong nila, una, ganun ba kasimple yun? How hard is it to get somebody? Can a mother, a wife, a spouse, diba? A child, ganun lang ba kadali yun na pagka-request ko, banned na sa platform? And then secondly, it's one thing to ban people from coming to casinos, but this is precisely e-sabong. Sa pagkakaintindi ko, kailangan ko lang ng laptop, kailangan ko lang ng smartphone, nandun na ako. I mean, how do you implement that in reality given na the barrier to entry is actually so low?
For restricting access to the platform, sir, we are requesting po for particular information like for player account. Actually po, before the directive to suspend e-sabong operations, we are already receiving a few number of requests for banning from players themselves. So they provide information as to their player accounts, and these player account information we endorse to our licensed operators for them to effect the banning. As to the family members naman po, they can always send emails to us or requesting for the banning also. Meron lang pong mga requirements to prove filial relationship. But definitely, once we receive these requests for banning, we immediately process them.
Ma'am, let me ask it a different way. How difficult or how easy is it to regulate e-sabong? In other words, is it likely that you will have illegal e-sabong proliferating and in that way we end up losing potential revenues at patuloy pa rin ng e-sabong?
As to proliferation po of illegal e-sabong operations, that is too early, sir, to say that immediately illegal operations would proliferate. But that is a possibility. That since there would be no regulation for e-sabong operations, considering that there is a suspension, that is a possibility that illegal operations would proliferate.
Kasi I'm looking at the model of Hueteng versus STL, di ba? We've had Hueteng for so long, we couldn't stamp it out for one reason or another. So we ended up introducing STL as a means to regulate and as well get a revenue source for the government.
Yes, sir. So again, that is too early to say, but that is a possibility that illegal operations would proliferate now that there is a directive to suspend e-sabong operations we have previously regulated.
On the other hand, Senator Tolentino has questioned your having actually come into the picture to regulate e-sabong, and he was actually questioning what your authority was in actually getting into the picture and regulating it. Ano na nga ba sinasabi ng PAGCOR charter when it comes to regulating e-sabong? Kasi apparently Senator Tolentino was saying there's nothing in the charter that allows you to regulate it to begin with. What's your take on that?
As we have previously discussed this issue, Ma'am Lucia, we derive our authority to regulate from the opinion rendered by the Office of the Solicitor General and from the Secretary of Justice. And our authority also was recognized by no less than the Office of the President, PAGCOR being a regulator of games of chance. And in those said memoranda, there was clarifications po since e-sabong being online in itself is different from the traditional. And in our framework, the traditional conduct of cockfighting, we recognize the authority of the local government unit over that. So since this is a novel modality or platform of gaming, the authority of PAGCOR to regulate such was recognized by these references po. And thus, PAGCOR just complied and obeyed with the directive to regulate it.
Is that something that you would consider as an alternate, a mitigating move, to work more closely with local governments in regulating e-sabong? Because I know that the actual sabong will continue, right? Is that something that you're looking into getting into at the very least? Because if there's actual sabong, it's inevitable that there will be e-sabong. It's hard to imagine that people will not bet online for sabong. Is that a possible area that you would explore in order to regain some of the income? No, not some, but all of the income lost from e-sabong.
Definitely, ma'am, with the directive to suspend e-sabong operations, anything online betting over the conduct of traditional fighting would cease because that is essentially what e-sabong pertains to. But yes, but of course, PAGCOR would always be in coordination with other partner government agencies should we now decide to study closely on how to better regulate the industry. Should it resume, or PAGCOR is open to coordination on any efforts towards regulating the industry.
Wait, so yung actual cockfighting, that's not as addictive as online sabong, right? I would imagine. I mean, I don't know really how it's played, no, but the tradition before e-sabong came to be, there was cockfighting, and it was considered a traditional, betting arena, and people did go there to bet. And I know of many who really invested in sabong per se, no. So, in effect, was that in itself addictive, or was it the online version that made it an addictive thing? I mean, apart from the fact that there was money involved and it was basically gambling now. But yeah.
As to addiction, Ms. Lucci, we are also hearing studies from other experts as to addiction, and it is mostly a personal, it's a personal thing, addiction. But with e-sabong, I guess the modality of betting became easier because we have to remember that e-sabong proliferated during the pandemic because there was no other forms of recreation for gambling aficionados, and it was a safe way to engage in gambling because it could be done in the comforts of your home with mobile devices. So I think that in itself made betting easier. But for addiction, Ms. Lucci, I think it's a separate field of study, and mostly it's a personal approach as to addiction.
Miss Jog, definitely suspension lang to, no? Is there any move at all to completely stop na lang e-sabong? Are there any suggestions along that line?
There is no suggestions along that line yet, Miss Amy, but the wording of, but the order particularly states for suspension of e-sabong operation.
Okay.
But you have no idea kung ano yung timetable, suspended until the end of the president's term ba yan? Or are you supposed to revive it while he's still president so he can decide kung itutuloy pa?
No period po was given for the suspension, and we at PAGCOR is just awaiting further guidance regarding the suspension. But as soon as the directive to suspend the operations was given, the same was readily complied and obeyed po by the agency.
Okay. Now, to that point, Ms. Jogno, I just want to be clear, ano ba yung mindset ng PAGCOR dito? Because as you've said a number of times already, you will comply with any guidance, diba? But that notwithstanding, how do you see PAGCOR here? Is PAGCOR just a good soldier in just implementing and complying on the order, or is PAGCOR in fact a champion and an advocate for e-sabong?
Of course, sir, we are just complying with the directives from the Office of the President. Our obedience or our compliance was first seen when our authority to regulate was recognized by the Office of the President. We readily obeyed to regulate the industry, and once the directive to suspend it was given, then we comply. So in that accord, sir, we are really just obeying the directive of His Excellency.
Yeah. So in the period of the suspension,
we are still on the implementation, on the full implementation of the suspension. So we are coordinating with our law enforcement agencies as well as with the DILG to effectively implement the order to suspend the operations.
okay, Ms. Jogno, ma'am, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Diane Erica Jogno is Assistant Vice President for the e-sabong Licensing Department of PAGCOR. Maraming salamat po ulit. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs on One News. And now joining us is Myla Villanueva, Chairperson of the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV. Good evening and welcome to the Chiefs, Ms. Villanueva.
Good
Good
evening.
evening. Good evening,
po.
everyone.
Good
Thank
evening
you for
po.
having me.
Thank you for joining us. Ma'am, we understand that PPCRV is undertaking measures to make sure that there is no dagdag bawas that will happen in this year's elections. I understand one of the measures that you're planning to take is to physically collect election returns and physically bring them to Manila for them to be collated and encoded and so on down the line. Could you tell us about that? Hindi ho ba magtatagal lalo yung inyong pag-process?
Now, let's take a step back. Let's explain to our watchers that there are around 106,000 precincts
Apo.
around the country this coming May 9. And our watchers are, they are accredited and by law allowed to take the fourth copy of the election return, the physical copy. Ang fourth copy po na ito is before the VCM transmits the electronic copy
Yes, ma'am.
to the COMELEC and to our transparency server. So I want to make a distinction between the physical return and the
transmitted return.
the electronic return. So the electronic return will be fast. The physical returns we bring to the command center and we match the two one-on-one between physical and electronic to ensure na we do not have any manipulation or, as you called it, dagdag bawas in the count.
So all returns will be coming to Manila po physically?
Physically, yes, and we have to thank the PPCRV volunteers for that. It's a really large logistical task
Yes.
to imagine, pick up all of these in the various voting centers. 37,000 voting centers this election cycle.
Wow. So how many volunteers do you have at this point? You need a lot.
We do need a lot. So if people are still wanting to do something for the election, please go to your parishes. You will find the PPCRV volunteer there. And luckily, we have 500,000 volunteers and counting as of today.
But you still need more and you will accept more.
Yes, we always need more and more volunteers. It's not just about being in the polling center. We are also accredited to man what you call the Voters Assistance Desk.
Yes.
Here, especially the young people, help our voters go to the precincts and find their precincts. So Voters Assistance Desk normally is 4 to 6 people and times 37,000. You can imagine the scale of the volunteers that we need.
Yeah, and Ms. Villanueva, of course, you're not just a volunteer for PPCRV. In the private sector, everybody knows you. You're a technopreneur yourself, involved in many technological companies. You have some understanding about technology more than most of us, certainly more than most of us here on this panel. In an age of digital voting and electronic voting, that is still somewhat of a mystery for a lot of people. It's magical, but a lot of people, it's still beyond a lot of people. Can you talk to us about our electronic voting right now, the entire ecosystem, and as you understand it, the integrity of it that people can bank on?
I was once a young volunteer when it was manual, and so many things have changed for the better because of automation. Back then, ballot boxes are snatched. You can never tell if there's anything happening in the count. There's no way to audit. Now that we're automated, we can track anything that happens from the VCM all the way to the servers. And that's the beauty of the automated election. Plus, because of the speed at which we can count our votes and canvass it, there's really less time for violence. We know already the results very quickly. And again, if anything goes wrong, we have audited the source code. There are checks and balances that are in place already with the automated system. And maybe let me add, when I talked about the unofficial parallel, the matching that we were doing to protect against dagdag bawas. In the past years, like in 2019, we had 87,000 precincts. We collected 77,000 returns, and we matched 63,000. Ang match rate is 99.995%, which really goes to prove that there was no dagdag bawas happening, which was quite prevalent during the manual times.
But concerns are also being raised now about Smartmatic, no? Yung technical aspects which we also don't understand. We're going to ask you now, can we trust the machine? Can we trust the system?
How we do it in PPCRB is we trust, but we verify. We've been with the COMELEC at the same time cooperating, but also challenging whenever there's things that we hope can be improved. And by and large, there's quite good cooperation. Now, aside from that, there are many steps. For example, May 2 to May 7, our volunteers and those of the political parties are conducting what you call a final testing and sealing. So as we speak, this morning, a number of municipalities and precincts are testing 10 ballots. There are 10 ballots that are voted upon, and these are fed to the machines for us to ensure that the machines are counting properly. So I want to assure our public that so far, it has gone smoothly. So those machines are then going to be sealed in time for our election on May 9. But also, we have a lot of experts in PPCRV, and also the political parties have their tech people who went through the source code review, meaning the software that runs these systems were really audited and looked at by many pairs of eyes of IT experts in the past months. And so far, so good. This source code is now deposited in the basement of the Central Bank of the Philippines, which we all witnessed, including the media, so that if anything goes wrong, hopefully not, but if anything goes wrong, we can always count on having the original source code there if there are questions in the future about it.
So,
Lucy, nakamute ka yata.
nakamute.
Mukhang may technical problem muna kay Lucy. So let me jump in. The R in PPCRV stands for responsible. No? So responsible voting. And to that end, what COMELEC asks PPCRV to do is not just vote to help in voter registration, not just in training of poll workers and volunteers, but also voter education. This still has something to do with technology, I suspect. How much harder is it? I mean, disinformation has always been there, diba? A lot of bad information has always been there in Philippine politics, especially. But in the digital age, in the social media age, how much harder would you say it is to really educate our voters?
As its pluses and minuses, it's so much easier to disseminate the real information. But it's also very easy. There's so much disinformation, as you had mentioned. So we always encourage, especially our young voters and our first-time voters who are easily, in a way, swayed by friends in social media or even strangers in social media, to please go to our traditional and our trusted sources, like yourselves, and really think and discern about not just the candidates' promises in the future, but also their past, what they have done in their careers. And, there's also a wealth of information for research. And we do hope, and we always, encourage our young people and our more older voters to really take their time, because it's easily available to us at this time.
Okay, ma'am. Hi, good evening. Ma'am, How much more difficult has it been for you, considering that this is an election happening within a pandemic? No, we have seen the results of the pandemic on the COMELEC processes themselves. No, we've seen how the pandemic in effect has delayed many of the usual schedules that COMELEC followed in past elections. And even now, no, a couple of days before elections, medyo naghahabol, no? What about for you? Is there anything, especially challenging this time around?
Well, again, there are things that have improved, believe me or not. But it has been very challenging not to meet our coordinators in person. I tried my best to visit all areas of the country, but it also has been good that in one call I can meet all of them and
Yes.
discuss all of the preparation. So we've been preparing for about a year now. I also want to encourage, in fact, our voters to remember that we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So it's important for you to really think about who you're voting. It is allowed to write this down and bring your how we call it código of who you're voting for inside the precincts. There are also a lot of tools available now, like the COMELEC's Precinct Finder, so that people can know what their precincts are and try to get in and out of the voting center as quickly as possible. I'm glad that the numbers are down, but I do hope that our elections does not become a super spreader event. So let's all cooperate to try to do our part in avoiding that.
Do you think that we're going to reach the same 80% turnout that we had in past elections?
Yes, I've been speaking to various stakeholders in the elections, and this has been a rather emotional and people really want to get their voices heard. So I think it's going to be in the 80s, and we'll know soon enough. Yes.
We've seen quite a number of prominent Catholic officials, including priests and some bishops, endorsing certain candidates. Of course, it's not the church itself that's endorsing candidates, but you've seen some officials doing some endorsements. I'm wondering if this has had any effect on the on you and your work, whether some groups are questioning whether or not you are taking any sides or being nonpartisan.
I understand that. We take our nonpartisanship very, very seriously. And of course, bishops and priests, they're citizens too, and they have the right to express how they feel. And they're not the only, religious people who endorse. So what we are very strict about in the PPCRBs, we are a lay movement. We are people of the church. 85% of our population is Catholic, but the lay people work for free and have always been doing so in every election cycle. Let's appreciate that work. And also, they're strictly nonpartisan. You cannot be campaigning for a candidate and joining PPCRB. And the good thing to note is that since we're parish-based, the community knows each other pretty well. We try to put volunteers within their barangays or in areas where they would know one another. So you pretty much know who is campaigning and who is not. And we adhere to our non-partisanship very strictly. So it's been difficult under the circumstances, meaning people may have doubts, but I'd like to assure the public that we're really very strict about non-partisanship.
Well, part of your task in your partnership with COMELEC is voter information. And there's been a lot of talk about the need to make Filipinos more informed in making their choices. No, how is your voter information campaign coming along? How was it the past year, for example?
Yeah, this year we chose something that is hard to go against, something that is quite mutable at this time, and that is our Constitution. We themed our voter education campaign around the 16 values that are asked of us as good citizenships in the preamble of our Constitution. Nobody can hit that. Everybody can understand that if your Constitution is asking you 16 values to be a good citizen, you definitely can demand that of any candidate that you are that's asking for your vote. So this is around makadiyos, makabayan, makatao, makakalikasan, and there was storytelling around that in order that everybody can understand it, no matter your background. And it has been well received. We've done that through channels of comics and to ensure that we reach our non-digital brothers and sisters across the country, and generally very well received. Obviously, we do not tell you who to vote, but help you in the discernment process and help you take your time, to imbibe information and really try to see both the past, the present, and the future of the careers of our would-be servant leaders for the various positions.
Ms.
How did
Villan-
you carry it out during the pandemic? I mean, we were all locked down. And did you do it online or did you gather people?
Yes, we have a very active social media team, and it's a hierarchical from the national pages. It's taken down to the various provinces, dioceses across the country, and we also have a number of volunteers who propagate this. We've had support from an influencer community that also shares this across their various channels. So it took a while. It was difficult, but I feel that we've also been able to reach people during the pandemic because these are the channels that they use at that time. But definitely, we also went around the country. I spoke a lot in radio, and we have coverage and a great relationship with the KBP, who was really supported all of our messages throughout the radio networks and TV stations that were made available to us.
Ms. Villanueva, with everything that you've shared, 4 days before elections, I guess it's safe to say you have many reasons to be optimistic. You're hopeful for a high turnout. You're confident that people got information, know how to take their information, even for the technology and the systems in place. So you have a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but with 4 days to go, is there anything that still keeps you up at night?
Oh yeah, I barely sleep now. I think that every election will have an issue. It's a huge logistical endeavor, not only for the COMELEC, also for the political parties, our national police, our army, and everybody has the challenges that we've been working on the past week. We've done our best, and we will continue to do so. 500,000 volunteers will be with you, our public in the polling places, and we pray and hope for the best. But we've really done our best to prepare. But you can never tell what scenarios will play out.
But to that point, if I could just push it, is there any weak link? If you could identify any at this point in our elections?
I'm still very disappointed to hear that so much vote buying is ongoing. I think that that's a big corruption of our democratic process. I mean, as 500,000 of our volunteers work for free and try their best to protect your vote, it's quite disappointing to hear so much of that information reaching us. It's very difficult to fight. It's been around for a long time, and you feel powerless to do anything about it due to all the circumstances we're facing as a country right now. So that disappoints, but I still hope that we will not take our right to vote for granted. There's a war in Ukraine now. They're fighting for their right to self-determination. And here we are. We have the opportunity to really vote, choose, and hopefully that's based on conscience, no matter what temptation comes your way. And, let's think, pray, and cast your vote.
If I could pick on that, or if I could ask you to just put on your technology hat again, I won't ask you to come up with a solution for vote buying, particularly in the digital age right now. But are you confident that at the very least after the elections, companies involved with platforms and digital technology and e-commerce can come together and we can actually hash out a way to address vote buying and the corruption of the electoral process over our digital platforms? Is that possible?
We've already started on that process. Governor Jokno and the e-wallet companies and fintechs have come together. The AMLC is probably warning. I'm warning already that can be traced, right? It can be traced, and we can essentially push that the AMLC to make it known if ever they find these things. But it was well announced, and I don't know if the impact of that is to go back to traditional forms, but certainly in the digital form of vote buying, there are patterns that can be traced, and let's see what comes out of it. But it's a good start. There was a thought process around it. It's in the execution, and we will come back together to see what we found.
Okay, Ms. Villanueva, ma'am, maraming salamat po. We really appreciate it. And best of luck to all of us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and I had a very nice time talking to you.
Thank you rin po. Likewise.
Thank you.
And Myla Villanueva, of course, is chairperson of the PPCRV. That, of course, is the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting. And that will be all for this edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, and vote Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.